Hello my spooky crew and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. My name is Alex and thanks for coming to my spooky corner of the internet. Alright, so this is probably the question I'm asked probably most often, whether I'm just talking to people or I'm doing interviews. They want to know, what was my first paranormal experience, or what was the experience that started it all? So I'm going to talk about it. Now, keep in mind, this happened, oh my gosh, almost 30 years ago. Oh my gosh, I'm old. This is something I'm just talking about my experience. Obviously, when I was about 7, 8, 9 years old, I didn't have like a critical thinking mind. I was just an experiencer, and that's where my memories are based. I mean, I have tried to look back at that experience with a bit more critical thinking, but I still haven't been able to debunk it. All right, so ghost story time. I'm going to talk about my first paranormal experience. But before we get started, be sure to click on that subscribe button, give this video a like, and click on that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload a new video. YouTube is weird. If you don't click on that bell, you may never hear from me again. And if you like spooky stuff and you want some spooky stories and spooky articles, then head on over to my website at thespookystuff.com. I also write books, so if you like paranormal books like how-tos on ghost hunting and haunted theories and all that good stuff, then go to my website as well. I got my books there. Speaking of books, I'm putting out a brand new book in a few weeks. It's about my appearance on haunted hospitals. You may have watched the previous video about it, but yeah, so my segment was only about 18 minutes long, which means they weren't able to tell the whole story. Haunted hospitals did a great job telling my story, but there was a lot there that they weren't able to cover because of time. So this book is basically filling in the blanks, filling in the plot holes, and hopefully answer any questions that you might have about the episode. If you haven't seen the episode yet, you can watch it on Discovery Plus. To sum it up in a few sentences, I was in a really bad car accident. While they were trying to save my life in the trauma room, I had an out-of-body experience, and I picked up something along the way, and it was not nice. And of course, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I also have a Patreon, so if you are really loving the spooky stuff and want to dive in head-on, you can get behind-the-scenes looks on my Patreon, as well as, depending on the tier you sign up for, you can get, signed books, and you can get a backstage look of what the spooky stuff is like, including bloopers and outtakes from these videos. All right, let's get started. Growing up, I grew up in San Diego, California, which means my life was beaches, palm trees, not a lot of spooky stuff. My grandpa had died around 1991, 1992. 92. And he was the love of my life. He was my superhero, my best friend. Losing him was like, heartbreaking. So my mom and I lived in apartments at the time, but after my grandpa died, my grandma asked us to move in with her to help relieve that loneliness, so to speak. A part of my childhood, a major part of my childhood, while my grandma was alive, was we would go to Kentucky every summer. Because my grandmother's family is from Kentucky. We're talking about Appalachian Kentucky. So right in the tri-state area between Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia. If you go across one bridge, you go to Ohio. You go across the other bridge, you go to West Virginia. Point Pleasant, West Virginia is only about an hour away. So it's a pretty active place. Anyway, I've always been weirded out by the woods of the area. It's very rural, very small town, lots of trees, lots of mountains and hills. Spirituality, Christianity is very active over there. Pentecostal stuff happening. There's something spooky in religion in general, and I'm not just talking about like religious oppression. I'm talking about like there's something going on in that area. If you've ever listened to the podcast Old Gods of Appalachia, I mean, there's something spooky going on in those woods. I've talked a little bit about this in my Hellier video, but yeah, I mean, I've seen like weird footprints around my great-grandmother's house, my mama's house, and also like at night, I would hear something walking around the house and kind of banging on the walls, and my mama would be like, "Oh, that's the devil trying to get in. You better pray, child." Now, here's the deal. Now, I can definitely give my mama credit that she was probably trying to scare me because, I was, a kid, 7, 8, 9 years old. I was easy to scare. But also, I was not allowed to go outside at night. Now, that's obviously just a safety thing, but there's just some weird things happening at night, too, like hearing some really weird sounds. And we're talking, like, it was all woods around, like woods and maybe, like, a house or two. So, like, this was country dark. I mean, your only source of light were the fireflies that floated around. Also, keep in mind, being from California, Southern California of all places, I wasn't really exposed to like big thunderstorms, not like what you see on the East Coast. Like when it rained, I mean, it rained in San Diego, you know, but when it rained in Kentucky, it was like rain falling sideways, thunder, lightning, and pure chaos. So on one of these dark and stormy nights, it was after my grandpa had passed, so I was probably like, I get mixed up between 7, 8, and 9 because the older you get, that stage of your childhood just kind of becomes a blur. I definitely wasn't in 4th grade yet. I want to say it was the summer of after 2nd grade going into 3rd grade. So I was probably like 8. That's like the safest age. But anyway, it was storming. My mama lived in this house where, I mean, it was your classic like post-depression style house. Well, not even post-depression, during the Depression. My grandma was born in 1930. So, I mean, we're talking like, yeah. And, you know, babies have been born in this house. My papa died in this house. Yeah, it's pretty significant. And so it's an old house. It's not like a mansion or anything. It's definitely like, you know, low budget type of house. It was storming that night. The room that I was sleeping in was all the way in the back of the house in the corner. And there was a lot of dolls in this room, but actually the dolls didn't really bother me, I'll be honest. And I had the curtains closed, but I could see the light from the lightning, you know, poking through like, you know, the folds and everything. So I decided to look outside because, you know, San Diego kid, I don't see these storms a lot. I don't see these storms a lot, so I'm gonna check it out. So I open the curtain and I see this hooded figure, almost like a Grim Reaper type of person, but it wasn't like the Grim Reaper, I don't think. And with the wind going crazy, I could see the trees like blowing and the leaves were like blowing off of their branches and the rain was practically going sideways. I mean, if you were to step outside, you probably would have blown away. This hooded figure was completely unbothered by the storm. It was like, it was a nice summer evening outside and he was just chilling out. But, you know, his head was down like this and looking up. I couldn't really make out a face either. I got a little weirded out, so I closed the curtain, I look away, and then I look back, open the curtain. He had moved closer. I couldn't tell if maybe he like had taken some steps forward, but it was like closer, closer, closer. It freaked me out. And every time I would look and again, 8-year-old Alex is not very smart. I kept doing like, huh? And he would keep getting closer, assuming he was a he, to the point where he was almost like at the window and I'm freaking out and I'm like, oh no. So I'm like getting into bed and putting the covers on me because, you know, blankets are our security and our shield apparently. So the sleeping arrangements whenever my grandma and I would visit Kentucky would be my grandma would sleep in my mama's room and then my mama would actually sleep with me or in one of the other rooms. So mama would usually come sleep with me, and the way this mattress was, it didn't sink when you sat in it, it tipped. So whenever you got into bed, it was kind of like an interesting thing to get into bed because, you know, the mattress would tip, so it took some finagling. And then whenever my mama would get into bed after me, you know, because the mattress tipped and she weighed more than me, it would tip up and my body would slide and I would hit hers. And, you know, I'd know, hey, mama is here to, you know, say goodnight and all that good stuff. So after I see that hooded figure getting close to the window, I close the curtains, I freak out, get into bed, and I'm sitting here like, okay, you know, just trying to like convince myself that I was imagining things. I was really freaking out because I'm like, I don't know what the frick I'm looking at. This was before I gotten into really anything into the paranormal, and I'm like, okay. So the bed tips. I didn't even hear footsteps, but, you know, I was also in my own headspace, so my mama could have walked in and I didn't even know. But the bed tips, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God mama's here. And I slide, like I usually do, but I slid off the bed. I slid off the bed, and I hit the floor. I look up. The bed is still tipped. It's still tipped. And then what felt like an hour, maybe a minute or two later, the bed just goes back to normal. Like whoever had been sitting on the bed had gotten up. Yeah. And I was shocked. I was confused. And then the other side of me was also thinking, Oh, that's cool. You could say that was the bite that got me into the paranormal. That's not the only spooky thing that I've heard about with this house, too. When my papa, my great-grandfather, was dying, he died in the 70s, I think, so he died like a good decade or so before I was born. You know, the family was all at the house. My papa was in bed, actually the same bed that my grandma was sleeping in. And everyone was just kind of waiting, you know, just waiting for it to happen. And my mom told me the story. My mom told me that she saw this ball of light on the grass in front of the house. Now, the house is on a hill, so it's all grass, and then it flattens out. And then you have the road. My mom said that there was this ball of light on the grass where it flattens out. So near the chain link fence next to the road. And as time progressed and as my papa was getting closer and closer to crossing over to the other side, that ball of light got bigger and bigger and bigger. And she said eventually it grew so large that it was like the size of a large basketball, like 3 times the size of a basketball. And as my papa passed away, that ball of light slowly lifted up and went into the sky. And then he was gone. So, yeah. And that story has always stuck with me. It's always stuck with me. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful too. It's beautiful. It was almost like as his energy was depleting in his physical body, it was manifesting outside of the house. I had a few more experiences after that. So after we moved in with my grandma, bedroom that I would hang out in, basically, there were twin beds in the room, like there was one on each side, and I laid down on one of the twin beds just to kind of look up at the ceiling, and it literally felt like something smacked me on the forehead, but there was nothing above me. There were no shelves, nada. And that freaked me out a bit too, because I'm like, oh, something just hit me and I can't see it. What? But it was nothing like my first paranormal experience. That's it. That's the inciting incident that started it all. Had that experience not happened, I wouldn't be here doing this video and telling you that story today. And I do talk more about this story in my upcoming book, One Bed Over, A Hospital Haunting, which is the book about the haunted hospitals event. So if you want to know more details, definitely check out that book when it comes out in a few weeks. And yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to share this with your friends and family who also enjoy the spooky stuff and paranormal origin stories. I release videos every Monday evening, usually Eastern Standard Time. So I also do a live premiere with each video, so you can chat with me and all that good stuff. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next round.